Hey everybody, so yesterday we talked a lot about what slope is and what differentiates direct variation from other types of linear functions. So super important concept, slope. So I just want to touch base with you guys again about what slope is, and then I'll do an example from the Delta Math assignment here. So first of all, what is slope? There's a ton of different ways that you can describe slope. Take a second here. Try to list out as many different things that you can think of to describe slope. Maybe what letters are used to describe slope, what different words are used to describe slope, what slope does for us, and maybe where you would use it in a real life context. So go ahead and answer the question on your page, and then we'll get back together. All right, so what is slope? Some of the things that you might have come up with is we use m for it. And to find it, we do the change in y over the change in x. I'm going to apologize in advance for my handwriting because I am writing on my Chromebook, so it's probably not going to be that great. But we're going to try it. We're going to see how this works. So change in y over change in x. Yesterday, I tried to hint at this idea, and I think maybe a couple people were able to come up with this. But change in y over change in x, well, y is your vertical change. And typically, we call that the rise, whereas the change in x is your horizontal change, which is your run. So your rise over your run. And then remember, if you're given 2 points, our formula to find slope is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So there's a whole bunch of different things here. And then I'm going to add on to that too. Maybe some people have mentioned this, but I'm going to make sure that we make this clear that slope is the measure of the steepness of a line. So when you're looking at a line on a graph, the slope, the number for slope, tells you the steepness of the line. All right, so we've got all these different definitions of slope here, different ways of thinking about them. Hopefully you're starting to think about, okay, where can I use this in real life? And we're going to look at some of those examples in the next few days and then in the next chapter as well. So I'm going to go ahead and go to a new page here to work on the Delta Math problem. So the Delta Math problem says, what is the slope of a line that passes through the points -4, 4 and -6, +6? Write your answer in simplest form. So on my paper, so everything that I do on this slide is something that you should do on your paper. I'm first going to list out that I've got -4, 4 and -6, 6. Those are my 2 points. So that left point there, that's my first point that they give us. So I'm going to label it as x1, y1, and this is my second point. So I'm going to label it as x2, y2. Remember, both coordinates are x, y, but the first one is my first point, so it's going to be x1, y1, and then my second point is going to be x2, y2. So in my formula, remember, it's y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. And then I'm just going to plug in my numbers. I've got 6 minus 4 over -6 minus -4. So the top is really easy. 6 minus 4 is 2. The bottom, remember, minus a negative turns into plus positive. -6 plus 4, well, that gives me -2. So in this case, my answer is 2 divided by -2 is -1. I'm going to test it to make sure it is -1. Submit. Yes, I want to submit that answer, and I am correct. All right. All right, going to go through another example here with you guys. This one's a little bit more tricky, and it's probably something that you've talked about last year, and something that Slope Dude definitely talks about in his video. So in this one here, I'm going to write out my 2 points. I've got -5, comma, -5, and -5, comma, +5. So we've got a lot of 5s going on. So this is my x1, y1, and this is my x2, y2. So if I plug it into my formula, I've already done an example, so I'm not going to rewrite the formula. I'm just going to go ahead and plug right in. So my y2 is 5 minus my y1 is -5 over my x2 is -5. My x1 is -5 as well. So now I just need to do some subtraction. Remember, 5 minus -5 turns into 5 plus 5, which is 10. On the bottom, I've got -5, now plus 5, which is 0. Now, what is 10 divided by 0? What's any number divided by 0? I hope you said that it's not possible. It's not an answer. You can't divide by 0. So in this case, this one is undefined. So the slope in this one is undefined. And if you think about this on a graph, if you think about these 2 points on a graph, if I open up a new page here and I just draw a little graph, -5 is right here, and then -5, +5 is up here. If I draw the line going through those 2 points, that's a vertical line. So vertical lines in general, anytime that you have a vertical line, so vertical lines have undefined slope. Undefined slopes. That's super important. So anytime that you have a vertical line, it's going to be undefined. And that's because you have a number divided by 0. So you can't divide by 0. So in this one here, it's undefined. Submit my answer. Yes, I want to submit that, and that is correct. All right, now we're going to move on to looking at it on a graph. So I'm going to make my delta math bigger here. So in this one, come on, delta math, load for me. Thank you. It says draw a line representing the rise and a line representing the run of the line, and then state the slope of the line. So when you're doing problems like this, or whenever you're trying to find the slope of a line, you want to pick points that are easy to look at. So you want to pick points that are going to go through the grid markers nicely. So if I'm looking here at my line, I'm looking at this blue line. I'm going to pick a point that goes through the grid markers nicely. Let's see. I see this one here goes through it nicely, so I'm going to pick that one. And then I got to figure out my rise and my run. So if I like to always do my rise first because I feel like that's what comes first in slope. So if I do my rise first, this line is going down. It's a negative line. It's negative sloped line. So I'm going to go down. If I go down here, then when I go over, it's going to be in between 2 points. So I don't want to go here. I'm going to go down one more. So now when I go over, it'll be even up. So I'm going to put my point here to make my rise go down 2. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to make my line starting here and run all the way back till I'm even up with that line. And then I'm just going to count for myself. I went down 2, so my rise is -2. My run is 1, 2, +3. So my slope would be -2 over +3. And I'm going to submit that answer. Yes, I want to submit it. And I got it correct. They show it going like this. I much prefer if you did the rise first, so you went down first and then right, but either way works. Now, I'm going to go back to my Jamboard page over here. I'm going to create a new page just so that we're clear, when you're looking at a graph, if I draw my graph again, I'm going to see if I can change colors here. When you're looking at a graph that looks like this, remember that's a positive slope. If you're looking at a graph that looks like this, it's a negative slope. And we've talked about now that if the graph is going up like this, that's undefined. I'm just going to write undefined. That's a terrible F, but you get the point. And then the last one that we haven't talked about yet is if we have a horizontal line. A horizontal line has a slope of 0. And what that means is you have 0 divided by some number. So already you should be starting to think about, okay, if I'm given a graph, is my slope positive? Is it negative? Is it 0? Or is it undefined? If it's 0 or undefined, boom, you're done. You don't have to do anything. If it's positive or negative, then you actually have to figure out, okay, how steep is it? I have to figure out what are the numbers associated with the actual rise over run. All right, I'm going to go through one more here of a positive sloped line. Come on, Delta Math, load for me. All right, so this one says draw the line for rise, draw a line for run, and then state the slope. So this one's a little bit easier because I'm looking right here where it crosses the y-axis. That's called your y-intercept. I'm going to put a point there because it crosses nicely. Then I'm going to do my rise next. Since it's a positive sloped line, I'm going to go up. And since it evens up again up here, it looks like it's close to evening up here too, but I'm going to go all the way up here to get my x-intercept. So I'm going to go do my rise going up 2, and then my run going over 2, and then I'm going to simplify. Up 2 over 2, that's 2 over 2. 2 divided by 2 is 1. I'm going to submit my answer, and that is correct. So they chose the one, that one's a little bit easier. If you go up 1, then right 1, that's the same thing. And this is what we're talking about with proportional. The slope is still proportional. It's just not that constant multiplication like we saw in direct variation. All right, so yesterday we talked about this a little bit, but I want to touch on it again because it's going to be useful for some of the delta math problems. So when we're looking at direct variation, remember direct variation is in that form y equals, I'm going to use m in this case so that way we're consistent, y equals mx. There's nothing else added on. If there was something added on, it would just be that plus 0 because plus 0 doesn't change anything. When we're looking at stuff that's not direct variation, we're just talking about linear functions in general. Linear functions, oh boy, that looks terrible. Linear functions in general, and we're going to use something that's called slope intercept form, and you'll see why I call it slope intercept form in a second. But it's generally the same kind of concept as up here, as this y equals mx plus 0, except there's one minor change. Instead of that plus 0, we're actually adding something to it. So I'm going to write it as y equals mx, and then instead of 0, we're going to have an actual number there. And it's going to be the base value of the problem, so we're going to call it plus b. Y equals mx plus b, and we're going to label it just like we have been. I'm going to rewrite it on a new page here. Y equals mx plus b. Y is going to be your output. M in this case is going to be our slope. X is going to be our input. And B is going to be our base, and I've kind of already touched on this, the base value is kind of just going to be where we start on the graph, and we're going to be starting at the y-intercept. Oh boy, that doesn't look like intercept. Intercept. Let me try to rewrite it again. Y-inter... It's not letting me write e's today. The y-intercept. So keep that in mind as we're going through these problems, that these equations are going to be in the form y equals mx plus b. All right, so if we look at this delta math problem, it says standard is slope-intercept form. Right now, the equation is sort of in what's called standard form. We'll talk a little bit about that more in the next chapter, but we want to convert it to slope-intercept form and simplify all the fractions that we can. So right now, it looks like 6y minus 8x equals 54. And just like we talked about yesterday, what we want to try to do is we want to try to solve this equation for y. And this is why we did so much practice with literal equations. So I'm going to make my t-chart, and I'm going to solve it for y. So the first thing I want to get rid of is this negative 8x. So I'm going to add 8x to both sides so that they cancel out. 54 and 8x are not like terms, so I'm just going to leave it as, I'm going to write 8x first, because remember, if we're thinking about slope-intercept form, it's mx plus b, so plus 54 over here. And then the last thing I need to do to get y by itself is divide by 6. And remember, we're dividing the whole left side by 6, so we got to divide everything on the right side by 6. So then I'm going to simplify. 8 over 6 simplifies down to 4 over 3x plus 54 divided by 6. That's going to give me 9. So my slope-intercept equation is 4/3 x plus 9, which means that my y-intercept is 9 and my slope is 4 over 3. So I'm going to go ahead and type that in, make sure it works. 4 over 3 x plus 9. Submit my answer. Yes, I want to submit that answer. And I got it correct. And it kind of walks you through exactly what we were just talking about. All right, so the last type of problem here is it's going to give you a point. It's going to give you the slope, and it wants you to write it in slope-intercept form. So slope-intercept form, just for a reminder, is y equals mx plus b. And if I look over here, it gives me a point, it gives me an x and a y, and it gives me the slope. Once we've plugged it in, the only two things that should have numbers are m should be a number and b should be a number. X and y should stay x and y. But we can use x and y to solve for the other two numbers, because we're given m in this one. We're given m is negative 6 over 5, but we're not given what b is. We need to solve for b. So I'm going to use my point 5 comma 2. I know in for y, I'm going to plug in 2. In for x, I'm going to plug in 5. And then I can solve it for b. So the two things you need to solve for are m and b. Sometimes you're going to be given m. Sometimes you're going to need to solve for m using that slope formula. So now I'm going to go through t-chart and solve. Negative 6 over 5 times 5 makes things really easy. That's just going to be negative 6 and then plus b. So all I need to do is add 6, and I get b is equal to 8. So then I need to rewrite my equation. I'm going to write it in green here so that I know it's the answer. My final equation then would just be y equals negative 6 over 5x plus 8. So when you're writing your final equation, you want to make sure that you're plugging in for m, plugging in for b, and then leaving x and y as x and y, because what that equation is telling us is that we have a bunch of different things that we could use for x and y. We want to know what are the different inputs and outputs, whereas the slope is the same the whole time, and the y-intercept is the same the whole time. So let me plug it in. Y equals negative 6 over 5x plus 8. And I'm going to submit. Yes, I want to submit. And yes, I got it correct. All right. So whatever you do not finish today in class becomes homework due tomorrow. And then tomorrow in class, you'll have a short 4-question formative based on this information. So make sure to email me if you have any questions on this. Otherwise, I will see you guys in person on Thursday.